After 10 months tenancy in the supremely dark room, you brought me to that tiny village on the bank of the Chitrotpula river. From that day we were together in that house of mud-washed walls, swarming with rice-paste cheetahs, the endless summer, the weeping Saravan, the river song, the dream of stars. In a moment all of them burnt to ashes at Puri's Swargadwar. The 22 kilograms of flesh and bone, the light crop of jute-like hair on the scalp, myriad dreams, the extinguished smile and the mischievous taunt of sons and grandsons. Why on earth you keep your eyeglasses on even when you sleep? Is it to see dreams better? You taught me the bliss of getting drenched in the first monsoon showers and dance, mouth open, gaping skyward with a huge desire to drink the falling raindrops as a thirsty swallow. Taught me too to roast in searing heat and then savor the joy of diving and swimming like a waterfowl in Chitrotpola's fearsome deeps. And when Chitrotpola quietly came and stood at our doorsteps in the season of floods, you recalled Mahanadi, which flows by your village. You too taught how to recognize the colors of the sky changing each passing moment. To roll on a mat in our courtyard and stare at the sky to count and identify the smiling stars. You used to say, even if invisible, the Lord's house was behind the stars, with its doors, windows, streets, courtyard, backyard, everything. The sky was his very own house, and the stars were lamps lit in that house, in the same way as you lit a lamp near the Tulsi Chora every evening.
One of the most significant Indian poets today, Sitakant Mahapatra was born in village Mahanga on the banks of the river Chitrotpala in Orissa on the 17th of September 1937. After matriculation from the local high school, he graduated in history from Ravenshaw College, Cuttack in 1957 and obtained his master's degree in political science from Allahabad University in 1959. After university teaching for 2 years, Sitakant Mahapatra joined the Indian Administrative Service, holding several responsible positions both in the state and the central government. Although he retired as Secretary Culture Government of India in 1996, he's continued to serve the government in various capacities, including as Chairman of the National Book Trust India for 1 term.
This is from where my poet's journey started. This river Chitrotpala, which flows by the side of my village. We used to swim in this river, play on its sands. Funeral pyres were lit also on the sands. The river had its many moods that changed with the seasons. The river listened to the village and its crowded situations, people, their joys and sorrows, yet it rushed on to meet the sea. From this physical and cultural landscape, my poetry took its simple idiom. The language which is as simple as the flow of the river, as simple as the flying of birds, as simple as the blossoming of trees on the riverside.
Extensive travels at home and abroad and interaction with celebrities from various walks of life seem to have helped Sitakant Mahapatra in not only extending the frontiers of his own, but that of modern Oriya poetry as well. His poetry explores the deeper meanings of life in its humdrum everydayness. The landscapes of his mind have sought to absorb all that affects life in the raw. The flavor of the soil is a dominant force in his work. Poetry for him is celebrating personal pain and agony and elevating it into universal joy. There are moments when only a pattern of interior monologues comes to the fore, giving the impression that the poet was engaged in mere soliloquies. But a careful study reveals the music beneath the surface of the words and the many voices that emerge from them. The apparent loneliness of the eye is joined by soft whispers, distant voices of memories and silent forebodings, signals that often betray the hidden presence of other selves within the poet's own dark consciousness. This is a new preoccupation as he pursues creative impulses in the solitude of his elegant, spacious house in Bhubaneswar.
When I looked up my poetic career, the shift has been both in language and in contents, how there have been changes in the emotional patterns, how I have tried to comprehend reality, how I have seen and felt the sound of emotions, the color of my mind, or shall I say the various landscapes of my mind, which like a farmer's field has different kinds of crops the year round, answering to the seasons. So like the seasons of the earth, there are also seasons of my mind, the landscapes of my mind, which are reflected in these 50 years attempt to understand reality, to understand myself in relation to reality, to understand the people around me, the events around me, and more particularly the physical and cultural landscape of Orissa into which I was born.
It is a long time now Father left you here, along Chitrotpola's flowing stream, the vast open fields and sunshine, just as I left him here, alone, the other day. Now and then I have come here and found everything as before, except a few young trees grown up and bending with flowers and fruits. Perhaps in the beginning you did not like it here, alone. Perhaps that is why you frequented our dreams, particularly Grandma's. But I am sure after a while you must have got used to everything, and like me, truant from school, plucking wild berries, you too roamed the wilds of the river island. Today, after many years, I am here. Everything as before. The river, the fields, the sunshine, except a few trees now grown old. Suddenly, I hear your boisterous, heartfelt laughter and see your bearded face lurking behind them. Dear grandfather.
It has been said that Sitakant Mahapatra does not write poetry, he meditates it. He is a poet who does not make any extravagant claim for poetry, maintaining that it is a part of one's own troubled destiny of a life that has been lived fully. A poet to whom the past, the memories of childhood, relationships, observed and lived reality, and the dream for the future are equally relevant. Poetry for him is also a question of sensibility. That is perhaps why his poetry is replete with images that try to bridge the gap between time and timelessness. He believes in the task and the possibility of poetry to create an alternative reality, and seeks in the dung heap of human history the possibility of the small but deep-rooted joy of human existence. While reviewing an anthology of his poems in Swedish, a leading critic spoke of the three voices in Sitakant Mahapatra's poetry. ancient mythical tradition, European lyrical modernism, and Orissa's sun-drenched villages. He could have added a fourth voice, the intimate, unalienated worldview of the tribal and its oral poetry, which is anchored in the rag and bone residence of his heart. He has at his disposal all the strengths of modern poetry, but marries them to the Indian tradition and couches them in a moving, intimate, evocative language.
My poems have always tried to bring out the relationship between our history and the present. I haven't overtly been a person who has sought to speak of the predicament of the common man, but that predicament has got mixed with a glorious past. In other aspects, for example, I have taken into my poem all aspects of Orissa and its sunshine, its rain, its tribals, its mountains. All this has entered unobtrusively into my poetry. One anthology of my poems is called the River of Images, Chitra Nadi. Another one, Pradakshina or Circumambulation, where the poems range all the way from my grandfather to my granddaughter.
Into the Apsara's navel, silently, stars and dewdrops fall all through the night. On the steps of the temple pond, the greasy patchwork clothes of tradition and history are washed on the large shoulders of Ganesha, giver of all knowledge. Like blind whimsical gods, or like a sudden gust of wind, 2 or 4 bats fly out from its dark womb towards an uncertain tomorrow along the banks of an indifferent sky. The unending afternoon comes to an end. Somewhere the bullock cart's creaking slowly fades. It seems as though in a moment time would stop over derelict empty fields at the edge of the gathering dusk. Someone calls out someone's name in affection, full of a desperate need to possess the other. Is it in this life or in another? A smile on the water's broad and shining face becomes a gesture of sudden hope and pulls the temple's shadow and the rising moon together lovingly. The long day ends in waiting. Before leaving with a weary yawn, the beggar wishes for the arrival at the temple door of some anguished devotee.
A conscientious reinterpreter of the Oriya poetic tradition, which is deeply ingrained into his consciousness, Sitakant Mahapatra has also meticulously used these profound early influences to intensify the rhythm of his more contemporary verse. The use of myth as a metaphor has come to be hailed as a major component of his poetry, which is simple in language but complex in thought.
Oriya Bhagavat by Sarola Das has a lot of influence on me. From his Mahabharata, which is a remake of the Sanskrit Mahabharata, I have inherited a lot of the rhythm of language, of the very intimate use of language, just as Jagannath Das' lyricism had an impact on me. In the early phase of my poetry, I had systematically used Indian myths and archetypes and used them in a modern context. They were all the characters from Mahabharata. 3 major characters which I took. One was Yashoda, another was Kupcha, and the third Jara, relating to Krishna's childhood, adult life, and his departure from the earthly existence for heavenly abode. These three poems have appealed so much to others. They have been translated into most European languages, into all Indian languages, have been danced by eminent dancers like Sonal Mansingh into all the in Orishi, and Pratibha Prahlad and Shobna Narayan in the duet of Bharatanatyam and Kathak, and Dr. Kanakarile into Mohiniyattam.
One of the most translated modern Indian poets, Sitakant Mahapatra's poetry is available in 11 foreign languages. There are 11 collections of his translations in English, 10 in Hindi, 4 each in Bengali, Punjabi, Urdu, Malayalam, and at least 1 each in most other Indian languages. Sitakant has very definitive views on translation and the effort that goes into transporting the thought from one language into another.
I have been fairly well translated not only into all the Indian languages, but by now my poems have been published in anthologies in 11 non-Indian languages. I must say that I have been particularly lucky in matters of translation of my poems. But I must say that most of the translators are poets in their own language of the front rank. This is only to say that words and language carry so much of a context, of a cultural baggage on their back, that it's well nigh impossible to translate all the nuances of meaning into another language.
Sitakant Mahapatra has received almost all the major literary awards and honors in the country, including the Oriya Sahitya Akademi Award, the Central Sahitya Akademi Award, the International Academy of Poets Citation, the Kumaran Asan Poetry Award, the Soviet Land Nehru Award, the award of the highest honor by the Soka University of Tokyo, Sarla Award, Joshua Sahitya Samman, the Third World Hindi Conference Award, the Orissa Council of Culture Award, and the coveted Padma Bhushan and the Bharatiya Gyanpith Awards. An eminent anthropologist, he is the foremost interpreter of the oral poetry of various Indian tribes. He has translated and edited 10 volumes of such poetry, including the definitive They Sing Live. And not content with interpreting the oral poetry into the modern medium, Sitakant Mahapatra has sought to meticulously research, investigate and present tribal society in its various manifestations.
My involvement with the tribal world of Orissa and the tribal way of life began in 1967 when I was the Deputy Commissioner of the district of Sundargarh, in the heartland of which, of the Munda country, is situated the Rourkela steel plant. I had first listened to their mellifluous songs as they returned from work in the mines and the factories. Later, when I asked for the text of the song, I felt that they spoke to me as a practicing poet, because here was some kind of a freshness of imagery, some kind of authentic expression of the emotions of the heart, and a lyricism which was unequaled in its musicality. I learnt later on Santali. Having learnt Santali, I had access to 4 other local languages like Mundari, Ho and so on, because they have over the years evolved a common language called Sadri. Over the years also I tried to collect their oral poetry, not in a simulated situation, but during actual festivals and life cycle rituals. I documented these oral songs over the years, and this resulted as monographs on individual tribal communities' songs, resulting in their linking it to their rituals, because most songs are also connected with rituals, connected with dance numbers. Based on these 10 anthologies of oral poetry and some new poems, I had edited a volume called The Seeing Life, which the UNESCO in its representative collection work has published recently.
On the hill's sloping ground, I asked you to give me love, dreams, a touch, tobacco leaves. And you said, here there are only the harvesting men, not here. In the twilight dark, at the place where the village now begins to be restless with the scent of mahula, I asked for your affection, your body, or else just give your word, I said. And you said, I'm always afraid of the fireflies and the lonely stars. It is better that we leave this solitary place. Inside the forest, when the beating of the heart could be heard, I asked for your love, your touch. And you said, oh no, here there is just the pale grey earth. Wouldn't this flower-like body, this pure unblemished soul, turn earth pale? Not here, not here. Beside the rivulet, there was no one, just the lone bird that sang. I asked for your touch, for darkness. And you said, on the rivulet's clear mirror, everything is seen. Not here, not here. The whole world had dropped off to sleep, even the moon and the stars. I asked for your touch, asked for life, and for my helpless, shivering soul, begged for a small place in the nest of your body. And you said, even in the dark, inside your eyes' mirror, everything is clearly seen.
Not only has Sitakant Mahapatra's prose and poetry been extensively translated into various Indian and foreign languages, they have elicited considerable critical response as well. Although he himself does not attach much importance to research on his work, there have already been 2 D.Lits and PhD dissertations in Oriya and scholarly works in Kannada, Hindi and English. The mythographer of time being of particular significance.
It's now about 50 years I have been writing poetry. The first bunch of poems were published way back in 1955. The first anthology was published in 63. And the latest one, which has been published this year, is entitled Sara Jibana Lokata, All His Life the Man. Into my poetry right from the beginning has entered the landscape into which I was born. The river, the village, the people, their folk idiom, their songs and dances, all this. It has never been a lonely landscape where the poet stands alone. But while looking at myself and trying to understand myself through words, through my own poetry, I have also quite often, as I have looked at the sky, as I have tried to comprehend reality, from experience having gone to objects, to images, and then again coming back to one's experience, I have sometimes distanced myself from the street. In this process, I have tried to always bring up some kind of a connection. In fact, my poetry has been always a matter of connectivity, connecting the dream of the future to the memory of the past, connecting the city, the turmoils of the city with the still center, as Eliot said, of my own being, connecting the ancient mythologies to the modern rhythm of life today. I know that words can be very errant. At other times it has been a struggle with the words, because language is so important. The nuances of language, as Anand Vardhan himself once said, Abdhanyaloka, that is the light of suggestion, the nuances of words, because words are not any individual's possession. It's a community property. It has moved from lip to lip over centuries, have acquired meaning. The poet's job, and I have felt that is how I have tried to give perhaps a new dimension to the meaning, taking on what it conveys in earlier times, but giving it a new dimension. Always going into new and fresh experience. इस्पात चढ़ई जे
A steel bird flies away,
flies
away. It does not pause above the water's green depths to look at the fish shining with the magic glaze of silver. Nor does it pause above the river island to eat the red berries and build a nest in the palm tree's body. A steel bird flies away, holding in its beak the dead lover's letter smeared with the night's sinister stench from the paper mill on the river bank. It seeks under the pale moon the princess of the ruins of Barabati fort, seeks through the night.
Among the significant poets of contemporary India, Sitakant Mahapatra indeed deserves a very special position. His distinction lies with his understanding of Indian philosophy and Indian culture. At the same time, the understanding of his native Orissa, its tradition and its philosophy, its culture, everything. He loves Orissa, he loves his language, he is very dynamic, he is a modern man. But he has not distanced himself from the roots, from the myth, from the legends and from his origin. But at the same time he is very unassuming a person. His major themes he draws from the native Orissa, and his hero is the common man, and he suffers and celebrates with the common man's victory and defeat, with his happiness and agony, and he gives myriad colors to his poetic expression, blending myth and modernity. He is a humanist, he is a good human being, and he has proved that a good human being can only be a good poet.
Sitakant Mahapatra and his wife now live in Bhubaneswar. They have 3 married, well-settled daughters, a son and many grandchildren, all of whom have been immortalized in some of his very personal yet universal poems.